There's a strange kind of silence that follows you around when someone ghosts you. It's not like the quiet in a library or the stillness of a snowy Michigan morning. It's jagged, unnatural, clings to your clothes, gets in your ears, makes every hour feel longer than it is. That's the silence I lived in after Eleanor stopped calling. We were engaged, 2 years deep into wedding plans, house talks, color swatches, cake samples. She picked out the ring herself. Rose gold, oval cut. Elegant but not flashy, she'd said. We were supposed to get married next spring. Invitations weren't out yet, but the venue was booked. Her mom had cried when we picked it. I remember that. 2 weeks before it all fell apart, she left to visit her sister in Grand Rapids. Normal weekend visit. They were close. I didn't think twice when she kissed me on the cheek and tossed her duffel bag in the trunk. I didn't know that would be the last time I'd feel her near me without suspicion. The first few days were fine. Couple of texts. Quick call at night. But by Tuesday, she stopped picking up. By Wednesday, my messages started piling up with no replies. I made excuses because that's what a man does when he still believes the people he loves can't hurt him on purpose. She's probably just busy. She might have lost her phone. Maybe her sister needed something. By Saturday, the excuses felt thinner than the air I was breathing. I left voicemails, calm ones, just checking in, just letting her know I was around. I wasn't needy. I wasn't begging. I was confused. No fights, no tension, nothing to trigger this. The silence turned colder by the hour. On the 6th day, I got a single text. Sorry, things have just been heavy lately. I need a little space. No punctuation, no warmth, just enough words to keep me from showing up at her door. I stared at that message for 20 minutes. My gut twisted. It didn't sound like her. Not even close. I reread our last few conversations, trying to find a crack. There wasn't one. That's when I realized something worse than distance had taken her. Something calculated. Something not mine. I still didn't know about Logan then, the ex. The reason she started dressing differently last month. The reason she got quieter after dinner. The reason she began calling our future a little fast. But I knew something was wrong. I tried not to tell anyone. Didn't want to hear the pity in their voices. Didn't want my brother asking if I'd checked her location. I'm not that guy. I'm not the tracker, the screamer, the emotional wreck in the driveway at midnight. That's not who I am. But every day that passed without her voice chipping something off me, I couldn't get back. I still went to work. Still showed up to job sites. Still oversaw the crew framing out a new commercial plaza near Saginaw. I hammered nails with more force than needed. I gripped clipboards like they owed me an apology. By week 2, it hit me this wasn't just space. This was erasure. She was pulling herself out of our story, one day at a time, one unanswered text at a time. And I, like a fool, kept holding the thread like it's still connected to something real. On the 14th night, I sat in our living room, hers, mine, ours, whatever the hell it was now, and stared at her untouched mug on the shelf. The one I bought in Traverse City. The one that said, "Let's stay in cheap cursive print." I realized I didn't know who I was engaged to anymore. Worse, I didn't know if I ever really had. I didn't sleep that night, just stared at the wall, running through timelines. And by morning, I'd made a decision. If she wouldn't answer her phone, I'd knock on the damn door myself. Grand Rapids isn't far, but that drive felt longer than it ever had. I left at 6 a.m., still too wired from 2 weeks of silence to eat breakfast. I just needed to see her face, hear her voice, know something real instead of choking on speculation. I didn't tell anyone I was going. No texts to her. No warnings. If she was going to vanish without an explanation, then she didn't get the courtesy of a scheduled visit. When I pulled into her sister's driveway, the place looked unchanged. White siding, blue shutters, cracked sidewalk Eleanor always tripped over. But it felt different, like I didn't belong there anymore. I sat in the truck for a minute, just breathing. My hands were gripping the wheel too tight. I had questions, no doubt about that. But I didn't want to yell. I didn't want drama. I just wanted her to look me in the eye and tell me the truth. She opened the door within seconds of my knock. No surprise. No warmth. Just a blank stare, like I was a contractor she didn't remember hiring. Her hair was up. No makeup. Hoodie and pajama shorts. Comfortable. Too comfortable for a woman who'd left her fiancé hanging for 2 weeks. Colton, she said flatly, like my name was some word she hadn't said out loud in a while. I drove here, I said, since you couldn't text me back. She didn't ask me to come in. Just stood there in the doorway, one arm crossed over her stomach like she was bracing for impact. I think you know why I came, I added. She nodded. Slow. Mechanical. Then turned and walked back inside without a word. I followed. Not because I felt welcome, but because this was my last shot at clarity. The house was quiet. Her sister must have been out. Eleanor sat on the edge of the couch, fingers interlaced, eyes fixed on nothing. I'm seeing someone, she said, without looking at me. There was no build-up, no apology, just that. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The air left my lungs without permission. Who? I asked. My voice barely made it past my throat. She exhaled sharply. Logan. I blinked. Your ex. Yeah. I let that sit between us for a moment. Logan, the guy she used to complain about, the guy who cheated on her, the guy she once called emotional poison. You said you'd never even speak to him again, I said, my voice calm but tight. She nodded. I didn't plan on it. It just happened. It just happened, I repeated, like I was trying on the phrase to see if it fit. He reached out a while back. We started talking, just catching up. She shrugged. I didn't expect it to feel familiar again. Familiar. That was the word she used. Not better. Not right. Just familiar. And what about me? I asked, still standing. We were planning a wedding. A life. You just disappear without a word so you can… What, try out a rerun? She finally looked at me then. And I'll never forget it, because she looked guilty. Sure, but not sorry. I didn't know how to tell you, she said. You vanished. That's how you told me. I could feel the rage rising in my chest. Not the kind that lashes out, but the kind that calcifies. That plants itself in your bones and doesn't let go. You strung me along for 2 weeks. Let me spiral. Let me question myself, question everything. And you were here, playing house with Logan. She looked down, then back up. I didn't mean to hurt you. Yes, you did, I said. You just didn't want to deal with the guilt of watching it happen. There was silence. And this time it was mine. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't beg for her to reconsider. I just stood there, letting the truth settle in my gut like wet cement. You've made your choice, I said, turning toward the door. She stood up. Colton. I stopped. You don't get to explain it now. You had 2 weeks. She didn't follow me out. When the door clicked shut behind me, it felt final. Not because she said it was over, but because I did. It had been 6 days since Grand Rapids. 6 days of silence. No calls. No texts. Nothing from Eleanor. And I didn't expect any. Then, on the 7th day, like a ghost that never got the message, she showed up. I was sanding down a cedar slab in the garage, trying to lose myself in the rhythm of it. The grain was stubborn, but predictable. Unlike people. The knock came soft, almost sheepish. I wiped my hands on a rag and opened the door. Eleanor stood there with a forced smile and a canvas tote over her shoulder like she was showing up for a coffee date, not trying to crawl back into a life she torched. Hey, she said, like we were still something. I stepped back, not to welcome her in, but to keep myself from slamming the door in her face. She walked in without asking. You've been hard to reach, she said, as if the past 2 weeks hadn't happened, as if her little vacation into Logan's arms was just a bad dream we both had. I didn't say anything, just stood near the table and watched her move around the living room like she still lived there. I've been thinking, she continued, maybe we rushed into things. Maybe I needed that space to realize what really matters. I waited. She always did this. Dropped a warm-sounding sentence, then waited to see if I'd take the bait. If I'd asked her what she meant. If I'd beg for her back. Not this time. What do you want, Eleanor? I asked, arms crossed. She blinked at my tone. I want to move forward, pick up where we left off. I made a mistake. That's all it was. She said it so easily, like forgetting to pick up groceries. I nodded slowly, then walked into the kitchen. Came back with the engagement ring she left in the drawer the day she left for her sister's. I kept it out of habit, not hope. I placed it on the table between us. No box, no ceremony. Her smile cracked. What's this? It's the end, I said. You walked away. Now I'm closing the door behind you. She didn't move. Colton, don't do this. I came back. You don't get to come back. I snapped, sharper now. You ran off to your ex without a word. Lied by omission for weeks. Left me in the dark while you figured things out. And now what? You want me to just hand you back the keys? Her lip trembled, just slightly. People make mistakes. Relationships are hard. I took a breath through my nose. No, you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose him. You chose silence. You chose to let me rot in uncertainty while you played house with Logan. She stepped toward the table, hand hovering over the ring. It doesn't have to end like this. Yes, it does. I saw it in her eyes then. Panic dressed up as entitlement. The look of someone who realized they burned the bridge too fast and too thoroughly, and now there was nothing left to walk back over. I can't trust you anymore, I said. And without trust, this, I gestured between us, is just a ticking clock before you vanish again. She looked down. Then, quietly, I never thought you'd be this cold. I never thought you'd disappear. We stood in silence. Then she picked up the ring, looked at it, closed her fingers around it. I'll leave it, she said, placing it gently back on the table. For what it was worth. She turned and walked to the door. But right before she stepped out, she looked back. Goodbye, Colton. I didn't answer. When the door clicked shut, I sat down at the table, staring at the ring. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad either. I was done. For someone who walked away so cleanly, Eleanor didn't stay gone. Started small. A text 2 days after she left the ring on the table. Just checking in. Hope you're okay. I ignored it. 3 days later. Been thinking about you. I miss talking. Delete. Then the drive-bys started. I noticed her car once in the rearview mirror, parked across the street from the hardware store I hit every Saturday. Not even subtle, same black sedan with the dent in the rear bumper from that winter she slid into a parking post. First, I brushed it off. Coincidence, maybe, but it kept happening. Another time, I saw her at the gas station 2 blocks from my place. No gas, just sitting in her car, phone in hand, pretending not to see me while doing everything to be seen. She never approached, never said anything, just hovered like a bad thought that wouldn't leave your head. That's when the messages changed tone. I know I hurt you, but I'm still here if you want to talk. You're being cold. That's not the man I know. Mia doesn't know you like I do. That last one hit differently because I hadn't mentioned Mia to her. Not once, which meant she was asking around, snooping, watching. I never responded, not a word. But inside, I felt it creeping in, that old anxiety, that sense of being watched, judged, followed by the very person who shattered me and expected to still have a say. I told myself not to engage. That silence was stronger than anger. But the night I found her parked outside my place at 10:42 p.m., engine off, lights out, I knew silence wasn't enough anymore. I walked outside, stood on the porch with a calm I didn't fully feel, and waited until she noticed me. She looked up from her phone, startled like a kid caught breaking curfew. I didn't wave, didn't yell, just stood there. Eventually, she rolled down the window halfway. I was just driving by, she said, like we were still playing the casual lie game. I nodded once, then spoke low and flat. Don't come here again, Eleanor. She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. You left. You made your choice. You don't get to linger in the wreckage like you still live here. I just wanted to talk. Then you should have stayed when I asked for it. She looked away. I stepped off the porch, slow and steady, until I was close enough to see the gloss in her eyes. I'm not angry anymore, I said. I'm not broken. But I'm done letting you orbit my life like some planet you abandoned. She swallowed hard. So that's it. That's it. She sat there a moment longer. Then, without another word, she rolled up the window, started the car, and pulled away into the night. I watched the taillights disappear down the street. That was the last time she parked in front of my house. Sometimes ghosts don't need to be exorcised. They just need to be told firmly and clearly that the dead don't belong among the living. Mia's first message came out of nowhere. It was a Tuesday night. I was halfway through replacing the sink flange under the kitchen drain, sleeves rolled, wrench in hand, when my phone buzzed. Hey Colton, I know this is random, but I just wanted to say I'm really sorry for how everything went down. You didn't deserve any of it. Mia, Eleanor's old friend. The one who used to laugh too loud at brunch and call me Mr. Quiet Eyes. We hadn't spoken since the engagement party. I stared at the message for a minute. I wasn't sure if it was bait, a guilt trip, or just someone being decent. But it didn't feel like a trap. Not like Eleanor's sudden messages with hidden hooks. So I replied, "Thanks. That means a lot." She didn't follow it with small talk. No prying questions. Just, if you ever need to vent to someone who won't judge, I've got ears and strong coffee. I didn't take her up on it. Not at first. But something about the simplicity of her message stuck with me. Over the next week, we exchanged a few texts, nothing dramatic. Just things like, "Rain hit hard here. How's your end? Have you ever finished that ugly deck you hated? Remember when Eleanor tried to cook pad thai and nearly set off the fire alarm?" First, I was cautious. She was Eleanor's friend, after all. But Mia never tried to defend her. Never give excuses. In fact, she never brought Eleanor up unless I did. And even then, she kept it short. It felt strange, having a connection that didn't demand anything. No agendas. No drama. Just light conversation that didn't feel like a landmine field. One night, I told her I hadn't slept right in weeks. That I still caught myself checking my phone for a message I didn't want anymore. She didn't say, "Time heals," or "You'll find someone better." She just wrote, "Yeah. The silence is loudest at night." That line sat with me. We talked more after that. Sometimes it was 2 texts, sometimes 20, sometimes just an emoji with no context. It wasn't flirting. Not then. It was survival. A rope was thrown into deep water, and I grabbed on, not because I needed saving, but because I was tired of swimming alone. She sent pictures of her cat wedged between couch cushions. I sent her a photo of the bird feeder I'd built from leftover decking material. She laughed at my dry jokes. I smiled at her typos. It was the first time I'd smiled without feeling guilty. One night, she said, "You know, I always thought you deserved more credit for putting up with Eleanor's moods." I didn't answer that one. Not right away. 'Cause deep down I knew she was right. And it scared me that someone else could see it before I did. Mia invited me to dinner on a Thursday. It was casual. No pressure. Her words. Just a meal, nothing weird. "You've probably been eating gas station sandwiches and drywall dust." She wasn't wrong. I almost said no. I told myself it was too soon, that things were too raw, that I didn't want to blur any lines. But part of me also knew I needed to face the outside world again. One meal didn't mean a relationship. It meant I was still capable of sitting across from another human being without drowning in Eleanor's shadow. She picked a small Mexican place across town, neutral ground. Cozy lighting, booths that didn't creak. When I walked in, she was already there, sipping water, wearing a denim jacket and that same crooked grin I remembered from before all this mess. Dinner was good. We talked about normal things. Work, old memories, bad first dates. She made fun of the way I cut my burrito with a knife and fork. I told her she ordered like a child, 2 appetizers and nothing green. For the first time in months, I forgot to feel like a man recovering from a collapsed life. But about halfway through, something shifted. Her tone, her eyes, the way her hand lingered near mine on the table. "I'm really glad you came," she said softly, tucking her hair behind her ear. "You look lighter." I gave a half smile. "It's been a long haul." She nodded, her gaze settling on me like it meant more than it should have. I used to wonder why Eleanor didn't appreciate you more, she said. I mean, steady job, loyal, you actually listen. That's rare, you know? I looked down at my glass, tracing the condensation with my thumb. Mia, I started, trying to find a neutral lane. She cut me off gently. I know you're not ready. She paused, looking suddenly nervous. I guess I hoped maybe, when you were, I'd still be around. I sighed, not annoyed, just tired. She meant well, but I could feel the weight shifting between us, and I didn't want to carry something I hadn't asked for. Before I could speak, my phone lit up. Eleanor, text. You and Mia? Seriously. My blood ran cold. I didn't respond, just stared at the screen while the restaurant's noise blurred into static. Mia saw the look on my face. What is it? I flipped the phone around. She froze. How would she know? I didn't have to guess. Eleanor was still watching, still listening, still clinging to the edges of my life, waiting for an opening she forfeited months ago. She's not done yet, I said quietly. Mia looked away, her jaw clenched. She has no right. No, I said, but that's never stopped her before. The night ended with polite smiles and a quiet hug. I told her I'd text, and I meant it, but something felt off now, something tangled. Mia had been kind, helpful, and I'd leaned on her more than I should have without checking my own boundaries. That was on me. I didn't regret dinner, but I knew now, if I didn't make things clear soon, someone else was going to get hurt. She didn't knock. I heard the front door swing open like it had years of ownership behind it, not the dead weight of betrayal. Eleanor stormed in with that same look she wore when someone parked too close to her car. Tight jaw, boiling under the surface, pretending she had the moral high ground. I guess Mia's your new therapy, huh? She snapped, slamming the door behind her. I stayed where I was, standing in the living room, arms folded. I didn't flinch, didn't yell. I just looked at her and said flatly, "You need to leave." She scoffed. "I texted you. I warned you. You stalked me," I corrected. "There's a difference." She stepped closer. "You think I don't see what's going on? She's been circling since the engagement party. You think I don't know when a woman wants something?" I stared at her, feeling something colder than anger settling in my chest. "You don't get to accuse me of anything. Not after Logan. Not after ghosting me like I was some name on your contact list you didn't know how to delete." "That was different," she hissed. "Yeah," I said. "It was worse." She blinked, like I'd slapped her with words she wasn't expecting. "You don't get to feel threatened now," I continued. "You don't get to walk out, then come back angry because I didn't sit around waiting for your next mood swing." Her mouth opened like she had a comeback cued, but it stalled. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the framed photo that had been collecting dust. It was from a weekend in Nashville. She was smiling, I was holding her waist, and everything in that shot was a lie now. I handed it to her. "Take that too. You left the ring. Might as well take the fantasy." She held it in her hands, silent. "I didn't come here to fight," she said quietly. "Then why did you break into my house?" I asked. She lowered her eyes. "I was scared. You moved on so fast. It made me feel disposable." That word hit like a dry match against concrete. Disposable. I stepped in close, just enough to make her look up. "You disappeared without a word. You played house with your ex while I sat here trying to convince myself you were still the woman I fell in love with." "I wasn't disposable, Eleanor. I was shelved. Like a coat you didn't want but didn't want anyone else to wear either." Tears welled up, but I didn't soften. "You don't get to feel bad now because someone else picked up the pieces you shattered." "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. "You just didn't care if you did." Silence. No dramatic apology. No grand excuse. Just her standing there with a picture in one hand and all her broken logic in the other. I opened the door. "It's done, Eleanor." Her eyes scanned my face for something. Anger? Maybe. Or regret. But I had none left to give. "I never stopped loving you," she said, "one last gamble." "And that's the problem," I replied. Because if that's what love looks like to you, I want nothing to do with it. She stepped outside. The door shut behind her with a sound that felt final. I locked it without hesitation. No more surprises. No more ghost texts. No more guilt loops. That was the last fight. And I didn't lose it, I ended it. We met at a small cafe tucked between an old bookstore and a barbershop with checkered tile and cracked vinyl chairs. The kind of place that made bad coffee taste like a warm habit. I picked it because it was neutral, quiet, public, no ghosts in the corners. Mia was already there when I walked in, a mug between her hands and that familiar guarded smile on her face. She stood when she saw me. No hug, just eye contact that said more than either of us had texted in the past week. "Thanks for meeting me," I said as I sat down. "Of course," she replied. I figured something was off. I nodded, looking out the window for a second before turning back. "I owe you an apology." She raised an eyebrow. "I never meant to lead you anywhere. You've been kind. You reached out when I was pretty messed up. But I think I let that comfort drift into something I wasn't ready for. And that's on me." Mia didn't flinch, didn't look wounded. She just sipped her coffee, set the mug down and said, "I knew. I just hoped maybe it would become something." I let out a quiet breath. "You deserve someone who isn't still shaking the dust off from something that damn near hollowed him out." She smiled gently, almost proud. "That's probably the most honest thing anyone's ever said to me." We sat for a while, talking about small things. She told me her cat had knocked over a lamp chasing a fly. I told her I'd finally finished sealing the deck. It wasn't awkward, just final in that soft, unspoken way two people understand when they both want to walk away with dignity. But before I could grab the check, I felt it, eyes on me. I turned toward the window. Eleanor, sitting in her car across the street, pretending to be on her phone. Watching. I didn't tell Mia. No point. She didn't need to be dragged into the tail end of someone else's spiral. I just looked back at her and said, "Some people don't know how to let go." She followed my gaze, her expression dimming. "Is that her?" I nodded once. Mia didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then, "She's not your problem anymore." I smiled. "No, she's not." We stood, exchanged a handshake that lingered a little too long, then parted. No promises, no future plans, just clarity. And outside, as I got into my truck, I didn't look at Eleanor. Not once, because that's how ghosts die. You stop feeding them attention. You stop mistaking noise for life. I changed the locks the next day, not because I thought Eleanor would come back. She already had more than once. But because I finally accepted I didn't need to leave the door cracked for someone who walked out willingly. After that cafe lunch with Mia, everything quieted down. No more texts. No cars parked across the street. No notes slid under the door or DMs from fake accounts. Just clean, still silent. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a void, it felt earned. I started waking up earlier again. No reason. Just liked hearing the world before it got noisy. Brewed coffee in silence. Let the radio play old country songs while I worked on the deck, or fixed the wiring in the garage I'd been putting off since spring. Some nights I'd just sit outside on the porch, wrapped in a hoodie, watching the sky change color. Nothing profound, just peace. I didn't reach back out to Mia, not because she wasn't kind. She was, but I realized what I needed wasn't another woman in my life. I needed me, and I hadn't really had that in years. I'd spent so long being part of we that I forgot what it meant to stand on my own and like the man I saw in the mirror. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter either. I was just done. Done apologizing for expecting loyalty. Done explaining why abandonment isn't a form of growth. Done being the guy who keeps waiting at the station long after the train's gone. The final text came a month later. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." No name, no follow-up, just a thread dangling in the dark. I didn't answer. I didn't even open it. I deleted it, then blocked the number. Not out of spite, but because I'd already had the last word. Not in a scream, not in a monologue, but in a sentence I finally believed. I deserve better. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even closure. It was clarity, and it was mine.